All right, so we're going to get started with adaptation, and I have to say I'm really excited about this topic. This is what I've been doing for probably the past 7 or 8 years, and I think it's really important, and I hope you were able to read those articles, the Fussell and the Mastrandria. Really important to understand the interconnection between mitigation and adaptation. And so today I'm kind of going to use the day as a bridge to talk about kind of the interconnections between mitigation and adaptation, how they fit together, and how they inform one another. So I wanted to start off just by talking about a very local adaptation effort that we have in the Gunnison Basin. So some of you have been involved in these riparian restoration projects of the Nature Conservancy. This is a picture of before, and this is a picture of afterwards. And you see that it's holding that water in that location longer. There's more vegetation growing. And oftentimes when we talk about adaptation strategies, we talk about ancillary benefits. So the adaptation strategy is not just good for building resilience to climate change, but it's good for other things as well. And so things like forage production, habitat for other species, this adaptation strategy that's being done locally is really for Gunnison sage grouse to help that species survive and thrive in a changing climate. But it does have other benefits. And one of the things I like about adaptation is it can be a grassroots effort. And so, for instance, when you think about mitigation, you kind of need some sort of top-down pressure sometimes to make some of those policies happen and to make some of those changes happen. But adaptation can be a really grassroots, bottom-up type of thing. So when we all get frustrated with not being able to make change happen, adaptation is often something on a very local level that we can do, other than mitigating our own carbon emissions that we are responsible for. So I have just 2 slides, and then I'm going to introduce a guest speaker today. But I want to talk a little bit about why it's so important that we need adaptation and mitigation and how they connect. So you guys all saw this diagram in the Fussell paper. And basically what you're seeing here is the dotted line is the trend line. And let's say that's temperature. Then this black line is kind of the regular variability around that trend. So each year over time, there's ups, there's downs. And as we read in that paper, that blue area is kind of the coping range. This is what we can deal with. This is what we can experience and still thrive in, and our systems are adjusted to be able to, survive in that kind of bluish area. And then you see how, you've got these red circles where we get above or below what we can actually cope with. So these are really challenging situations for us. And in the paper, they talked about how if you think of 3 different time periods, time period 1, you haven't done any kind of adaptation yet. And, you're kind of going along. Time period 2, you get this huge, record high, and it's very challenging. And you realize maybe we need to do something to adapt to this. Well, you do the adaptation, and you can see how that coping range expands on that side of it. Well, I want you just for a moment, I know that this is not what this diagram was meant to show, but I want you for a moment to think about the fact that this is with mitigation actions. So think about, okay, well, we've mitigated, and so this is our trend line because we've mitigated. Well, what would happen if we hadn't mitigated, if we hadn't done any actions early on? What do you think that graph would look like? Yeah. Tyler? Yeah, it would be sharper. It would be sharper, so you probably would see more of an increase, and you'd probably also see more extreme highs and lows. So when you think about why we need to mitigate in order to adapt, in this situation, we can experience, these increased highs, and then we can learn from that and say, well, let's do some sort of adaptation to expand our coping range. Well, if that's happening really rapidly, there's no, it's very, very challenging to adapt in time. And just like that Fussell article talked about, you may adapt by building a new reservoir, and that expands your coping range for that E2 time, and you're okay. Well, what happens when that trend continues going and you reach that E3? Like, do you expand the reservoir then? There's infrastructural costs and there's sunk costs that we put into those sort of adaptation actions. And so I just want you to think about the real interconnection between adaptation and mitigation. And then one very concrete kind of story about why we need adaptation. This is a community of Newtok in Alaska, and it's a community that right now, as we speak, is trying to relocate. They have seen increased storm surges, increased coastal erosion. They cannot adapt in place. They just can't. And so right now they're working, there's no system in place for them to be able to move. I mean, when we think about climate migrants, the issues that we're going to have to deal with over time, there's just no system or structure in place to really help these things happen. And so they're having a problem because the agencies that they need to work together aren't working together yet. And so I think that there are several reasons why it's important to think about adaptation. First, it's happening now. We can see it, it's happening, and we have to do something about it. Secondly, it's going to keep happening. Even if by some amazing feat we stopped all carbon emissions today, we would still experience climate warming for the next 100 years because of the greenhouse gases that are already in our system. So we are going to experience some level of change, and we just have to accept that and roll with it. Like I said before, it's also something that you can do on a local level. It's very context specific, and so you can make actions at a very local level. And I would say the fourth thing, and the thing that kind of makes me most passionate about, is the people that are going to experience this kind of change, whether it's here or in Bangladesh or other coastal communities, are not the people that created the problem. And so there's a real social justice issue here. The people that are going to experience this kind of change and have to deal with it are not necessarily the people who have expended all of the carbon dioxide and therefore are responsible for it. So I think that we need to think about climate adaptation also as an important step, because we need to learn how to mitigate the potential impacts that other people are going to face. And so with that, we are really lucky today to have a guest speaker who's also a Western alum. Rose, is your last name Talk? Talk. Yeah, okay, Rose Talk. She's a Western alum. She started the Sustainability Coalition here on campus. She was part of that. She initiated one of the first campus composting efforts, and now she works for the insurance industry. And when you think of an industry that has probably the most to lose from climate change, insurance is it. And so she's going to share with us some of her thoughts and ideas about what they should be doing to mitigate and adapt, and kind of just thinking about the future of insurance. So Rose, and here, thank you. This.
Should I just put this in there?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks. I might turn that off just
Okay. Hi, guys. So I'll give a little bit more background about myself in a moment, but I want to start by asking you guys, when I say insurance, what do you think of? What do you think?
Bills.
Bills, yes. Yeah.
Actuaries.
What's that?
Actuaries.
Actuaries, good.
Protection.
What's that?
Protection.
Protection. What else?
Death.
Death. Interesting.
A lot of math.
Pardon?
A lot of math.
A lot of math, yeah, actuaries, a lot of math. One of the highest paid professional math positions you can get is as an actuary.
Lawyers.
Lawyers, mm-hmm. How does it make you feel? How does insurance make you feel? Ripped off, okay. How else?
Safe.
Okay. Why does it make you feel ripped off?
Because you pay for this thing all the time, but you never end up using it, right? And so you feel like you're being judged arbitrarily against other standards that are outside of your control, and none of your bill is dependent on that. So,
And when you do use
frustrating.
it, it's not guaranteed.
Yeah, then when you try to use it, then you end up having to go through all these hoops. You're like, hey, I paid for it for years and years and years, and now you're like gonna fight me on this.
Right, yeah. And so that in particular, I echo that completely with the health insurance industry, which is kind of, in my mind, I do mostly property casualty, so that's home and auto, for personal lines, commercial lines, as well as life insurance. Health insurance, I'm licensed to sell health insurance, but in my opinion, it's kind of the gimp that we put in the basement, because we just don't want to deal with it. It's kind of its own animal that's evolving right now. So I share that opinion with you on health insurance. and ripped off. I mean, I deal with that opinion and that, like, it's a really strong emotional charge in dealing with people on a daily basis, having these conversations, trying to create value around what this product is and what it's designed to do. Some of you said protection, exactly. So creating value around that while also trying to mitigate those concerns and that really strong emotional charge around the financial side of it. I like to put things together that don't usually go together. I love peanut butter and pickle sandwiches. I love, I love Scotch and espresso milkshakes. Have you ever tried that before? Oh my God, it's delicious. I'm a vegan hunter, and I am a hippie environmentalist with corporate ambitions. And this is kind of my next path of my life. And so I am a Western grad. I have my undergraduate degree in cell and molecular biology. I have half a master's degree in restoration ecology. That kind of petered out before I got distracted by the next shiny thing in my life. And I spent my first part of my professional career working for the Biomimicry Guild based out of Montana. So Janine Benyus, who wrote the book on biomimicry, she was my boss, still a very close friend of mine. Got to travel around the world. I did a lot of international consulting on sustainability, on innovation, on biomimicry. And wanted to move back to Gunnison. Montana wasn't necessarily the place for me to be, and wanted to be here. And when you live here and you need to make a living, sometimes your options are a little bit limited. So long and circuitous path, I found myself working in insurance, which was really a joke. It was kind of like the worst case possible thing I could think of to do, and last resort. But I did it because I needed to survive and thrive in this particular community financially. And the relationship that I have evolved with insurance has grown and changed dramatically in the last 2.5 years. So I asked you what you think about insurance. Protection. When you take the highest level view of what insurance is and what it's designed to do, it's supposed to protect you from financial catastrophe when something catastrophic happens in your life. It's to help you maintain financial integrity. At the highest level, I can totally get behind that. Insurance is something, I thought it was just unique to the US when I first got started. How would I know any different? But pretty much all countries have some form of insurance. What I am doing right now in my work, I mean, obviously I have my sales, my day-to-day basis on what I do there, but bringing myself and my own values full circle is really examining the intersection of insurance and climate change, something that's really, really important to me. What do you guys think of? Have you thought about the intersection of insurance and climate change before?
Crop adjustment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Home insurance, yep. Fire? Yep.
Coastal issues.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So pretty savvy group in this room. I have asked the same question to my colleagues, and it's like crickets, which to me means opportunity. It means opportunity to educate, opportunity to make change. So I've done a lot of time, or spent some time researching this and what other US insurance companies are doing, what other global insurance companies are doing, and by and large, we still have a lot of room for improvement. Like you said, the threats that are a result of increased climate change are increased payouts. I mean, there's more lives to protect, there are more homes to protect, there's more crops that can fail, there's more coastal lines that are going to be disrupted, there's more business interruptions as well, and the other one that I didn't realize, but it's starting to happen more and more, are lawsuits as a result of polluters, carbon polluters. So insurance companies are on the hook for these liability exposures, paying damages and also paying for the attorney fees as well. So insurance industry globally is, if we were a country, we'd be the 4th wealthiest country on the planet. There's the US, there's China, there's Japan, and insurance. As far as the net worth of what we're worth, which means that we have a lot of voice. We have a lot of will to throw around when it comes to advocating for change, to exercising different choices that can actually wield a different future for us. Since the 1980s, well, in the last decade, the insurance industry has paid out over $50 billion for weather-related claims, and that number has doubled every decade since the 1980s. So it's precipitous. Insurance companies are finally starting. Billion, yeah, $50 billion, which in the grand scheme of things, the whole insurance industry is worth about $4.7 trillion. which is right up there with Japan. They're at 4.7 trillion as well. So 50 billion maybe is a small drop in the bucket, but when they look at their bottom line and they see that the decade prior it was 25 billion and the decade prior to that it was 12.5 billion, they're paying attention because this is very quickly becoming, they're just hemorrhaging money. And that comes back to us as consumers. I sell it, but I'm a consumer of it too. So we're pissed that our insurance rates are going up. I get it, I got my bill and I was mad. But I wrote my own insurance, who do I get mad at? I just stern talk with myself in the mirror. What are you doing? But it gets passed back on to us because one of the things that insurance companies aren't capable of doing right now is risk modeling and projecting for the severity and the frequency of the catastrophic losses that we're having. And because they can't project for it, they can't budget for it. They don't know how to charge for it. Insurance companies do not like unpredictability. They exist on predictable things. Actuaries, their job is to figure out the likelihood of something happening so that they can charge appropriate premium to be able to pay it out. This is completely upending their reality, but they're not. It's kind of like that frog that's in the water that's boiling slowly. They're not really seeing what the exact problem is yet, with the exception of a few insurance companies. So that's really what I am about right now, because what we're seeing, Florida is a really good example of this. Let me back up just a second and say, you guys have all heard about the National Flood Program. It's managed by FEMA. Anybody here have warm, fuzzy feelings towards FEMA? Like, yeah, they do a really good job managing disaster. Anybody think that? No. That's what happens when you put insurance in the hands of the government. It's not handled very well. So there is a role for private insurers and a very strong argument for that. And in Florida, what's happening is that those coastal storms have gotten so large and so catastrophic, and the specific peril in that case is wind from the hurricanes, that insurance companies are starting to make that an excluded coverage. The private insurance market is making wind an excluded coverage on their policies in Florida, which means that everybody who lives there has absolutely zero coverage for hurricanes. Hello, that's a huge gap. That's a big deal. So the burden is shifting to them. So the government of Florida, state government of Florida, is starting to charge more just in taxes to basically extend FEMA services to account for that. Again, really bad choice to put insurance-related duties in the hands of the government. It's just they're not designed to manage that well. Private insurance industries are designed to do that. So more and more, that's becoming a trend. Other states that are like California, with all of the earthquakes and the damage that they see there, they're kind of looking at Florida like, oh, hey, maybe we should do that too. Let's just exclude it completely. Let's not cover it. Pushing the burden onto the taxpayers. So it all comes around in one way or another, whether it's an insurance premium or whether it's in taxes, it becomes an affordability issue. Not to mention the fact that now there's huge gaps in our social safety net. Because you hit on it perfectly. The people who, whether in this country or otherwise, living on the coast, living in vulnerable areas, they're the ones who are getting damaged the most and have the least access to remuneration. So that's a trend that we're seeing. Those are some of the threats, I guess you could say. As far as opportunities go ahead.
Why Florida specifically?
I think it's just the number of hurricanes that they see there, being a peninsular state and getting it from both sides. And they have seen some, the sea level rising and everything, storm surges, just what Corey was saying earlier. So for whatever reason, Florida law has, because every state is a little bit different with their insurance laws, and one of the difficulties and expenses of insurance companies being international is conforming with all of the different laws. And apparently the law in Florida is holy enough, like there are holes in it enough that the insurance company can get out of insuring wind. Mm-hmm. And not every insurance company is doing it, but it's a trend that is headed in that direction. So it's not a categorical shift yet, but it's trending that way for sure. What was I going to say?
Opportunities.
Thank you. So the opportunities we have, like I said earlier, being the fourth largest country financially, That's a huge opportunity there to exercise a lot of political will in the right places, because there's a lot of money to throw around, and Corey said it perfectly. Most industries lobby against climate change regulation because they stand to lose. It means they can't pollute as much as they normally do. It means that they have to retool all of their manufacturing operations, which is very expensive. So they're, no, we don't want climate change regulation. Insurance companies, because we stand to lose the most, I mean, there's some articles that I've read that are projecting, very doomsday, that the insurance industry could be completely bankrupt in the next 1 to 3 decades. Completely bankrupt. The 4th largest country in the world completely bankrupt within the next 10 to 30 years. That's a big deal. So that's a lot of political will to move around. I was reading an article this morning, actually, trying to figure out what new stuff is going on. I learned that Japan's largest insurance company has just spent billions of dollars helping with mangrove rehabilitation, recognizing that that was something that they could invest in. A lot of insurance companies are now starting to focus their attention on these sort of adaptation and responsive things that they can do. So imagine your auto insurance paying for it on a pay-as-you-go basis, where you would have some type of a monitor in your car that would know exactly how far you've gone, and your rate is based on how much you actually travel. So that if you're like most of us in this community where we bike around and maybe put on 3,000 miles on our car a year, our insurance rate would reflect that. Other companies are looking towards smart homes, so that we have that console, like totally Jetson style console, where your house knows everything that's going on, and it's controlling the windows and the shades and the heat and the cool and the cycling of your appliances, and they're all talking to each other and coordinating to balance the energy efficiency. That's something that insurance companies are looking at promoting, like providing that technology to be available to consumers, and then also rewarding it in the form of credits or discounts on the policy. Other things they're looking at is when there is a loss, they're providing income and even increased coverage if that homeowner or if that business is willing to rebuild to higher energy or higher building performance standards, whether it's gold LEED certified or just energy efficient or green materials or lower carbon footprint or whatever those standards are, but making that an incentive and providing additional coverage for that.
Are there immediate benefits for the insurance company to having homes more efficient, or is that like a long-term planning to try to just reduce global?
It's a little bit of both. So in the idea of the smart home in particular, when you have systems that are sort of monitoring like gas leaks or water leaks in particular. Water leaks are, whether it's from a frozen pipe or a ground pipe or something like that, that's a huge source of loss. So if you have a system that's communicating and monitoring that to prevent the leak, some companies I know are now, if you have a little device that you can put on your washing machine that detects if there's moisture issues, you can get a discount for that, because insurance companies are very interested in preventing losses. It's better for the consumer, it's better for the insurance company. So the smart home definitely fits into that strategy as well as preventing losses, and the long-term thing of reducing emissions. Let's see, what are some of the other things that they're doing? Oh, for the farmers, somebody mentioned the crop loss, and that's a huge thing that insurance companies are on the risk for, or exposed to. So investing in strategies that are going to rebuild soil stabilization and also the hydrology of soil systems and of drainages as well, so that more water can stay where it's supposed to stay, so that the soil is healthier, it's got a higher organic content, and just does a better job of holding plants in place. So that's one way that insurance companies are actually getting a little bit innovative. And you might be wondering at this point, which I was, like, well, which ones are doing it? And there's not a lot of naming, but one thing I was able to find, of the 355 insurance companies in the US, the top 13 that are considered leading, which is, in the grand scheme of things, like where we should be versus where we are, there's still a huge gap, but they're the ones that are starting to think about it and talk about it, are ACE, which I've never heard of, Allianz, Allstate, AIG, Axis, Commerce Insurance, FM Global, Hartford, Munich Re, which is reinsurance, Somo Japan, Swiss Reinsurance, and Zurich, which I found interesting. Allstate's the only one on there that is, and maybe Hartford, as a household name, something that we would recognize. Do you guys know what reinsurance means? So have you heard of Lloyd's of London? Okay. So reinsurance is basically all of us little guys insurance company, even though we're not, I mean, we're worth a lot, but we're still little in the grand scheme of things. There are some risks that we take on that we're not able to collect enough premium for by ourselves, or it's too big of an exposure to accept in and of ourselves. So we go to another insurance company that insures us. So it's sort of the reinsurance. It's the next level. It's the insurance company that insures the insurance companies. That's reinsurance. It's big dollar. It is a risky risk when you have to go to Lloyd's of London, which is one of the most well-known reinsurance companies. Swiss Re and the Munich Re are other examples of the reinsurance.
Does the AIG do that as well?
That's a good question. I don't know how they are structured. Let's see. What was the other point I wanted to make? Any other questions for me as I'm gathering my thoughts?
Are there any of those insurance agencies that are kind of thinking more proactively? Is there anything that's being done to bring them together or like create a coalition?
Yes. Yeah, and that's actually, of the insurance companies that are talking about it, they're recognizing that it does need to be a systemic approach and not just a little piecemeal thing. And so it is, give me just a second to find this list. There were 3 entities that are coming together to coordinate all of these conversations. And I might have to follow up with you because I can't find it off the top, but ClimateWise was one of them, and drawing a blank on the other 2, I'm sorry. But yes, it is, when it comes to the strategy, they do recognize that it needs to be a systemic thing, and they're all participating and having conversations. And as usual, Europe is doing a little bit better job of being more proactive. They're the ones that are sort of spearheading this and saying, hey guys, let's get together, let's talk about this, let's plan, let's make this happen. And the US is starting to pay attention a little bit, but they're not as proactive.
Yeah, you said, you talked about the political will of the insurance company, how they exert this political pressure. Can you give an example of how that's manifested in our political system, or do you see examples of that currently? Because I don't really see where it's like, where that influence is coming through.
Yeah, it's such a new conversation that I don't know specifically what it is, but building awareness and creating a dialogue in public policy is kind of where the focus is right now. But things like working with the governments for flood insurance and the changes that are happening with Florida and the wind exclusion. And working a little bit more in the insurance company's favor because they're trying to get out of that market there. But then also when it comes to building standards and regulations, making sure that homes are built to a certain energy performance level. That's one conversation that they are having. I'm not aware of any other specifics, but I will look that up. Yeah. In general, the activities that they are focusing on, sort of as this systemic approach, are commitment to comprehensive response, which is that systemic piece, engaging in climate science and communications, which is important. We need scientific literacy when it comes to this. Promoting loss, prevention, and adaptation. That was a lot of the things that I talked about before. Aligning terms and conditions with risk-reducing behavior. So again, focus on prevention. Crafting innovative insurance products, providing technical services, offering carbon risk management for offsets, financing consumer projects, investing in climate change mitigation. That's actually a very small portion of it, which I find very interesting. Building awareness and participating in public policy, leading by example, so reducing in-house carbon emissions as a corporate value itself, and then disclosing climate risks. And that I found particularly interesting. And I have no sense of time when I'm talking, so you should control me, reel me in when it's time to stop.
You have like 6 minutes.
Perfect. Okay. So disclosing climate risks, and that goes back to the lawsuits that I was talking about, where companies aren't disclosing how much pollution they're doing or the effect that it's having on climate change, and now directors are starting to get sued because of their negligence for how they are polluting and the impact that they're having on greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a concern that they're looking at.
Who's filing those lawsuits usually?
I don't know, probably entities like Greenpeace, I would imagine, because they tend to do stuff like that. And there's probably other consumer groups and potentially communities are filing sort of class action lawsuits against industries that are polluting in an area. So kind of bringing it back to little old me in Gunnison, Colorado, working for little old American Family Insurance, and what I'm doing, I started a conversation with my company to figure out what the heck we're doing, because we're not on that list of top 13, and I want to be on that list. I want to be at the top of that list. Part of that's just I'm an overachiever, but that's a different story. So I called up a few different people, and I had to go down a few different rabbit holes because this was so not on the radar of anybody in the company that I talked to. I had to get handed off. It's like when you go into call a 1-800 number and you just get passed off to people because nobody knows what to do with you. That's what they did with me. But finally, I found somebody who was willing to bite into what I was saying. I actually had a conversation with him earlier this week. He's the director of innovation in our corporate headquarters, which I was so excited I didn't even know we had a department of innovation. Because innovation and insurance, those are not words that generally go together. And that's why I was so excited, because I love peanut butter and pickles. I love things that don't go together. So I just sort of questioned him about what American Family is currently doing, what are our sustainability ambitions and practices, where does it fall on the list of things that our company is thinking about. And he admitted, heartbreakingly to me, that it's really not even on the radar. So I said, well, how do I get it on the radar? Who do I have to talk to now? And we had a fabulous conversation. It was the highlight of my month. It was the highlight of his 10-year career. He said, usually when agents call me, they're bitching about whatever is not working. This is the first time anybody's come to me with a really good idea and is super passionate. So that was amazing. Little changes, like voice your enthusiasm, be passionate, be inspired, make it known. It matters. Side note. So he is now connecting me with the people in the company who are working and managing the sustainability efforts, which are things a little bit more oriented, reducing paper consumption, reducing the amount of mail that has to go back and forth and things like that. So they're smaller, but important. He's also working on making contacts in the marketing department for me as well. And he asked me to basically create a story. He said, if you want this to have teeth with the company, you have to create a story for the company why it matters, why it should be something that we should pay attention to. I said, all right, what's the theme of my story? And he said, you need to show that it is consumer driven, that this is what our policyholders want, that this is what communities are demanding. And I said, okay, I can do that. I know some people, I just had lunch with them last week, who said, I've got some students
We got a story for you.
who are doing projects who could help you create a story. And soup, all together. So,
Slow clap, dramatic slow clap. Think about you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know Guy had lunch with some folks. So this is, like, I need help. I need help creating this story about why it matters and why it's consumer driven and why it's coming from the ground up. Because insurance industry is in a position where we can demand that top-down change when it comes to policy regulation, when it comes to the way that our policies are written, the way that we reward and structure our policies in and themselves. And this needs to happen from the bottom up as well. I'm a big advocate of that. Top down meets bottom up, somewhere in the middle, and this is where the magic happens. So that's what I'm asking of you guys today, is help me to create that story from the bottom up so that I can go back to my company and say, this is why we need to be at the first of the list. Here are the things that we need to do. Here's why it matters. So, get to it. I'll help.
I have a question about lobbying, right?
Yeah.
We had an IPCC person here last week. Man, time's flying. So it was last week. And it really got me thinking about how hard global UN level policy change really is, right? Mm-hmm. And we know that policy change doesn't happen, unfortunately, without really powerful lobbyists, right? Without really powerful interests sending lobbyists to push for change. Mm-hmm. You're telling us that you have a $4 trillion industry that maybe is the main multinational industry that's going to suffer immediately from climate change. So you have this amazing possibility for lobbying out of the industry to influence policy. But the end of your story tells me that lobbying is not possible without a serious consumer movement. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of how you see it? Mm-hmm. So how do you balance being good to your customers who view insurance the way we just talked about with sparking a movement from your customers, which could alienate them?
Right.
How do you balance that?
Well, I mean, part of the story, And I asked you in the beginning, what are your thoughts and feelings on insurance? You're pissed about your rates. Your rates are just going to continue going through the roof because we can't price adequately for the risks that we're taking on. And so what do? When we don't know, we charge you more. So that is a very specific pain point from a consumer that connects sort of that unmitigated risk modeling with the consumer needs and what's happening down here. So the price pain point is a huge piece, and it affects the bottom line of the company too. The other story is the feelings where a lot of the work, I recognize some of your faces in here and doing stuff in the community when it comes to like the Mountain Roots Food Project, which is another organization that I've been involved with.
Co-founder.
Thank you. Where we have these local organizations that are saying, look, this is what I'm doing. I am investing in food production techniques. We don't know exactly which way our climate is going to go, especially here. So imagine what it would be like if we had an incubation laboratory farm in this valley that was sort of hedging our bets. It might get colder here. It might get warmer. Right now, we know how to grow in a zone 3 climate. Maybe we should actively be pursuing the technologies and the seeds and the knowledge and the skills for growing in a zone 2. Maybe we should also be looking ahead to zone 4 and 5 because it's probably going to get warmer, but we don't know. This is the thing. It's unpredictable and it changes a lot. And as a community to say this is what we're doing because it's important to us to be able to produce our own food. It's important to us to be able to nurture and stabilize our soils. It's important to us to be able to regulate the hydrology of our valley because we are a headwaters region. We should be rewarded for that as a community. We should be rewarded for that as an organization, as the homeowners and the people who live here. And getting an insurance company to give credit, to give some type of incentive or reward back for those types of efforts.
The other thing, just while you were talking, I thought, well, there's like the cool possibility of this 4th largest country in the world to be lobbying for mitigation. But then there's also this incredible power of dictating sort of the structure of insurance, which could either lead to adaptation or maladaptation. I mean, when you think about like crop insurance, like if you structure your insurance so that plant whatever you want and, you know, and we'll insure it, or if you structure your insurance to say plant smart, given what we know about climate change, I mean, you could really, the insurance could be this engine for creating the incentives for adaptation.
Absolutely.
So that's cool too.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea to say we're no longer going to insure crops when you plant acres and acres of corn as your monocrop, but we will insure you if you do the polycrops and you do soil crop rotation and you manage your crops and your soil really, really well. Exactly.
For like adaptation strategies that you just suggested, like how powerful are you as a regional office to offer some of those opportunities, or do you really need to go ahead?
I got nothing right now, yeah. Other than, there's nothing that I can do right now other than be the squeaky wheel, which that's where it always starts. Somebody advocating for change in a different future. So how powerful are we as an office? I'm the only one in my office that thinks like I do. I am the only one in my region and my district that thinks like I does. That thinks like I does. I'm back here in Gunnison, Colorado. Yeah, like I said, it was a rabbit hole for me to find the people in the company that would finally bite onto this. So, and he said outright, this is going to be an uphill battle for you. And I said, that's all right. That's how everything that I've ever accomplished in my life that's worthy of accomplishment has been. So with American Family, it's going to be a slower road. It's something that I'm committed to because it turns out I actually love insurance. Oh my God. I love my job. It's amazing. So I'm committed to it. And I also, in whatever way, want to participate with those other things that are happening. And like, I don't understand why, when I talked about it with the people that would finally listen to me, why they hadn't been thinking about it, because it's so obvious to me with the threat to the bottom line, with the fact that our competitors, like Allstate being one of the most recognizable companies there in Hartford, like they're going to get ahead of us really fast. And the free market economy competition still exists. So that whole like keeping up with the Joneses mentality is alive and well in the company. And that is, I see as a strong leverage point for me too. Like Allstate's doing it, we should do it too. In fact, we should do it even better. So did I answer your question? Okay. And John, did I answer yours? I feel like I kind of, okay, good. I saw.
To help you be a squeaky wheel, I am currently shopping for car insurance.
Awesome.
So if I call into your office, and I mean, how, as consumers here in this valley, what will your office do? How will they respond when they hear more and more of these interests? Or like, you mentioned like the metered smart cars.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because a lot of us do ride bikes, or a lot of us live in smaller houses. Are they open to those kind of ideas, or are they just kind of twiddling their thumbs if you ask about it, or will they like refer me to somebody else? Or is it just worth getting that idea in their ear?
By the way, never tell Rose you're looking for car insurance.
I know she drives a little tiny Civic.
I do, yes, and I'm about to hand you my card. But so I think the way that most agents would handle it, so this was another big revelation for me. Like, I am a little earth muffin hippie chick, and I just kind of assume that everybody else thinks and values the way that I do. And so when I walked into my first corporate meeting, and it was a bunch of people who do not think or value the way that I do with political orientation or lots of other orientations, it was a whoa. So I think the majority of agents kind of fit in that. Typically, insurance industry is very conservative. It's very traditional type of people that are attracted to it. So I think if you shop around, you start asking for it, if it's not something that the company is already offering as an option, the person that you speak with or the agent might say, nope, that's not something that we do. And then that's where the conversation stops. With me, I collect those ideas. And Rick, who is the agent of our local office, Rick Nelson, he is actually our district representative on agency council, which is the direct line of communication from field agents to corporate. And he has a lot of power and a lot of influence, so that when I have my little bucket full of wonderful ideas, I pour them onto his desk and I say, take these to corporate. And he does. He has a lot of integrity when it comes to carrying those ideas forward. And a lot of the innovation that American Family has accomplished to this point is because of that agency council connection, which comes from consumer demand. So when it is enough, like if every single one of you walked into my office and said, I want to buy auto insurance with you, but I'm only going to do it if these things are an option for me. And I just lost every single person's business in this room because that's not something that I offered. Hell yeah, I'm going to tell my company, big time. That's a lot of business that I just lost because I couldn't offer this, but Allstate could, or State Farm could, or whatever. So yes, there's homework for all of you. Call up your insurance people tonight and say, tell me what you're doing, or you're going to lose my business. That'll make people pay attention. I saw a hand over here, I think. Okay.
All right. Well, we have time for one more, or we'll break for like 10 minutes, and then we'll come back here and talk about climate skeptic assignments. But let's thank Rose for.
And of course,